Where do we start with that, guys? Brentford 3, Newcastle United 1, and that was a painful watch. I'd rather watch paint dry than Newcastle United right now. No team cohesion, no will to win, no aggression, no intensity. Can't even string two passes together, man. And the team selection by Eddie Howe needs called out. So there is going to be some harsh truths in this video, but let's be brutally honest about it. That's been our performances all season. Even when we've won games of football, we have not been convincing. And you might say, oh, yes, we've been good in the Champions League. Look at who we've beaten in the Champions League. Let's be brutally honest about it. Beat Union Saint-Gilloise away. They had an ex-Portsmouth defender playing at centre-back for them. We beat Athletic Club at home. They had 7 key players missing. Then we'll beat Benfica, who just bent over backwards for us to beat them. We've been shocking this season, and it needs called out. And it starts now, and the turnaround starts now. I had a little disagreement with somebody from Geordie Journos on Twitter. He was saying to me, after 10 games, we were 11th last season, so things will turn around. You go and watch all of our performances in those 10 games last season. We did not have a single performance like this. Every team in a season goes through a bad spell. You always go through a bad spell where you just don't get the rubber green and struggle to win games. I don't mind losing games of football. I've said this before. If we go to Brentford, play well, and lose, I'll hold my hands up and say, yeah, we didn't get the rub of the green, we still played well, there was an intent to win. It's when the performance is so lackluster, non-existent, that's when it irritates me. So this video here today isn't about losing to Brentford. It's more about the performance and the manner of the defeat, because the team selection for me was wrong. How can you continuously play Dan Burn at left back? Do you know what's funny about all this? Me, you, everybody else sitting here watching this video can all see with our eyes the problems, but yet nobody on the coaching staff in Newcastle United can notice these problems. Can you see I'm angry? I'm not normally like this in videos, but I am fuming. Full respect to Brentford, because they absolutely deserved their win. They played us off the park. They were more energetic, they had more intensity, but they had more in possession as well, and they moved the ball around beautifully. We just couldn't cope with their press. And honestly, I want to get stuck in all this because there's going to be some individual performances called out, and I've got some harsh words to Eddie Howe because it needs addressed. We can't just keep on paving over the cracks and being like, oh, well, he's been successful for us. Yes, he's brought wonderful times, but we've got to look forwards. I'm not saying I'm Eddie Howe out, because I'm definitely not, but it doesn't mean he's not immune to any criticism. So let's get into it. First thing I want to say is finally we've come away from the green strips. I thought they were a curse, but again, today we got nothing we deserved, which was absolutely fuck all. We were disgusting, shocking, horrendous, shocking individual performances, shocking game management, and shocking management from the staff. And I come away from that and I was thinking, I'm lost for words. Like, the reason why I'm providing videos with so much information on, because I can clearly see our performances have not been great this season. And I've said time and time again, I don't mind losing games of football. Let's address that, because I do not mind losing games of football. There's no embarrassment going to Brentford and losing a game of football. But the attitude from the players, they look lost. Eddie Howe looked lost in the dugout, and it looked like, to me, he had no idea on how to change the game around to benefit Newcastle United. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. That is exactly what Newcastle United are doing right now. I mean, just look at the statistics in that game. Brentford had an expected goal of 2. The penalty probably put it up, but we had an expected goal of 0.42. We have only hit over 1 expected goal away from home this season once. That isn't good enough. We've got no attack intent. We've got no desire to win the game. And so my question to you guys, is Eddie Howe putting us out there to be defensively solid and trying not losing the game rather than trying to win the game? Our blueprint last season was always trying to win the game, being aggressive off the ball, overturning the ball, not allowing the opposition to get in any rhythm. We disrupted their rhythm so much that they couldn't cope with it. This season's been the complete opposite, and that comes from the dugout. That comes from the manager, because we've actually covered more ground away from home than we have at home. So it's not for a want of desire. That's more of a tactical instruction. And that's the frustrating thing, because if you just set them up differently, you don't even need to change your formation. I've said this before. Sometimes it's not about the formation. It's about the instructions that you give to the players. And I've got no doubt from what I'm seeing, even though I'm not in the training ground or I'm not there during conversations, it looks like Eddie Howe is instructing these players differently this season to what he was last season. Now, you can't sit there and tell me that, oh, just because Alexander Isak has left. No, I don't want to hear that. One player should not completely change the mindset of a full team. And do you know what else is funny? I made a video yesterday saying we struggle with possession. We struggle when we have more possession than the opposition. The majority of our wins last season was when we didn't have the ball. We're so good against the ball that when we got the ball, we're not so technically good. As you can see, we had just more possession than Brentford. We had more passes, but that means fuck all in a game when you're not doing anything with it. And our passes are going backwards, side to side, because we're sitting far too deep. And I'm just repeating myself in videos now because I've continuously said we cannot sit this deep. And just to prove how far deep we are sitting, look at our centre forward. His average position is on the halfway line. Look at Bruno, Tonali, Joe Linton. Their average position is in their own half. So we've got nobody in advanced areas. This isn't good enough. I'm going to be perfectly honest. And our performance today is really frustrated me. So let's get into it. Because once again, we're sloppy in possession. Inside the opening 10 minutes, right, there was a sequence of play where we give the ball away 4 or 5 times in like a minute. And I was just thinking today is going to be one of those games. And it certainly was. And do you know what I hate, right? I hate you having to watch our performance and then come and sit and listen to me be negative. This is not a video that I want to make. I do not want to make these videos after a performance like that, because the last thing I want to do is sit here and whinge and you to listen to me whinging. But I can only speak about what I've seen with my eyes. If I was to make up and say we were just unlucky today, then I would be lying to you guys, and that's unfair. But I've got to be honest, because that was shocking. It was lethargic, sitting too deep, zero ball appreciation, moving the ball too slowly, and we were second best to every single ball. And we will get on to little incidents in the game, but I've just got to talk about the overall performance, because again, I'll say it again, why can we sit here and see the problems, but nobody in Newcastle United can, and they won't address it? It's frustrating. Get us squeezing 5 yards higher up the pitch will make a massive difference. We can't even string 2 passes together, and I've been saying it all along. These wins in the Champions League are paving over the cracks. That win against Fulham was paving over the cracks because our performance wasn't great. The highest ranked team we've beaten this season is 15th place Fulham. And then the only other 2 victories we've had are both in the relegation zone, Wolves and Nottingham Forest. That is simply not good enough for somebody that wants to qualify for Champions League. And if we keep on putting performances out like that, you can kiss goodbye to any sort of European football. And you all know I make notes as we go. And on the 21st minute mark, right, we had an XG of 0.06, 1 shot, and we'd completed 95 passes. That is incredibly poor. So even after 21 minutes, you could see that it wasn't working. I would have made changes after about at least half time, maybe even before, because what we were doing wasn't working. Brentford were in the ascendancy. Yes, we went 1-0 up, and we were lucky to be up 1-0 at half-time. Let's be brutally honest about it, but we were. But that game was always going to go one way, and that way was Brentford scoring and winning the game. And do you know what the idiotic thing was, right? Brentford looked predictable. They didn't have any unpredictability in their game. They were doing the same thing consistently, but yet it still caused us a threat. It was obvious what they were doing. Targeting Dan Burn, they were being a little bit direct, trying to break into space, but yet we struggled to cope with anything that Brentford threw at us. And then when we did get possession, there was no movement, no rotations off the ball. We couldn't deal with Brentford's press, and we just looked like we had no team cohesion, and we looked so dysfunctional. And then when Joe Linton come off, I tweeted out, that's probably a blessing, and I mean that in the nicest possible way, because Jacob Ramsey, Eddie Howe was forced into making a change, because after 35 minutes, I would have probably made a change there and then, because it was clear the game was only going to go one way. So I was thinking, yes, something's going to change. We're going to add a little bit dynamism, somebody with a little bit more technical ability in the middle of the pitch, just to get on the ball and try and make things happen. But again, we still looked flat. And then against the run of play, Harvey Barnes steps up with what was a beautiful goal. That was probably the only positive thing that happened during that game. And I've said this before, I've said it in my preview to this game. Get him in and around that penalty area and he will score you goals, because he is one of the best finishers. But the problem we have with that is, if you're playing with Dan Burn at left back, he's not going to provide you width to create that space for Harvey Barnes to come inside. So Harvey Barnes was isolated for the majority of the game, and apart from that one moment out wide. And Harvey Barnes' strengths aren't one-on-one ability. He's not a one-on-one dribbling specialist. So again, you're playing to his weaknesses, which impacts everybody else on the pitch. But let's just talk about that goal, because the way he just maneuvered and manipulated inside that penalty box was a stroke of genius. He sent 2 Brentford players for a hot dog. See you later. And that little turn in the box just to open up separation and a yard of space was magical, and it was a nice comfortable finish as well. Low and hard driven with his left foot, and that is why Harvey Barnes is so dangerous in those penalty areas. But yet again, we're not playing to his strengths. I genuinely believe we're not playing to anybody's strengths. Let's give Nick Valdemar credit in that moment, because that little flick to Harvey Barnes is exactly when Nick Valdemar's at his best. But totally against the run of play, we went 1-0 up with some individual brilliance. It was brilliance from Harvey Barnes, and I wanted to see more of that, and I thought, right, we've been on the back foot the majority of this game. We haven't strung 2 passes together. But yet again, we've been given a lifeline, just like at West Ham. Let's not make the same mistake twice. What did we do? We started sitting back, inviting Brentford onto us, and eventually it was inevitable that they were going to score, and that's exactly what they did in the second half. We were lackluster. We were shocking. We just looked clueless in and out of possession. We were getting dragged into places we didn't want to be. Dan Burn was getting dragged centrally. He was getting dragged out wide. He was just non-existent in that left-back area. Now, we've said time and time again, Dan Burn is not a left-back. That cost us today. But totally against the run of play, we went in half-time 1-0 up, and I thought, right, Eddie Howe, get them regrouped, change it, tweak it tactically a little bit to give us more control, give us more of a threat in the final third. But again, we came out in the second half and did exactly what we did in the first half. The game was only going to go one way, guys. It's like Eddie Howe just gets his book out and reads the same page over and over again. We've got to tactically tweak this. Otherwise, we're just going to continue playing this way. We'll probably pick up the odd win, but it's going to be a long, long season, guys, because you can play well and still lose games of football. And last season, we were doing that in the opening 10 games of the season. So that we went on a good run after those opening 10 games where we went like 8, maybe even 10 games unbeaten. I can't see us doing that this time round. So these guys, the players themselves and Eddie Howe, needs to take accountability. They need to give themselves a kick up the arse, look at themselves in the mirror and say, we need to do better. And don't worry, guys, we are going to speak about some individual performances. I just want to talk about the game as a whole because I felt like we weren't pressing. Once again, our midfield was so unaware of everybody else's positions. We're on the same line continuously. That was dragging Dan Burn inside, and then Brentford were just playing through the line so comfortably. I mentioned this in my preview. It happened against West Ham. It happened against Bournemouth. It happened against Arsenal. It happened against Brighton. The opposition are just finding space in front of our defence, behind our midfield, so easily. The gaps in our system is absolutely atrocious. And the funny thing is, you can see it. So why isn't Eddie Howe tactically adjusting this? The team looks like a bunch of individuals that have never played together. And that's the brute honesty. I'm trying to see positives, but what positives can you take from that? You tell me in the comments because I'm really struggling. Now, let's get on to some incidents because Nick Portman, yes, he can save a shot here and there, right? But he is useless at everything else that comes with being a goalkeeper. Coming out and collecting the ball, punching the ball, just commanding your area. He's got no presence in that penalty box at all. And what on earth was he doing for their goal? We've continuously spoke about Brentford's long throws. When you're playing against Brentford, you've got to set up a tactic to defend these set pieces so well. Do you know what's funny about goalkeepers? And when they come out and are so weak like that, goalkeepers are the only players on the pitch that can come out and use their knees. Nick Pope should be coming out and taking everybody that it's in his path out the way, but yeah, he's just flopping at it. He looks like a wet kipper trying to break from the water. It was just atrocious, just misjudging the flight of the ball, not being strong enough, just simply not good enough. So Brentford score makes it 1-1. Yet, still no changes from Eddie Howe, even though the obvious changes were there. Take Dan Burn off for Lewis Hall, give us some dynamism on the left-hand side, give us some threat, because the game, again, was only going to go one way, and that was Brentford attacking, and the longer the game went on, the more likely they were to score. And then Dan Burn gets absolutely done inside that penalty area. He gets pinned one-on-one, and Utara, just a little step over, drags a ball away from him, and that was clear as day as a penalty. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. How we got away with that, I do not know. And I thought, look, We're getting the rubber green here. We've been absolutely abysmal and still having the footballing gods on our side, because for me, that was a penalty on Utara. And if that had been against Newcastle United, I would be screaming for a penalty. So I would be contradicting myself. I didn't say it was a penalty for Brentford. Clear as day's penalty. But if there was any indication for Eddie Howe to take Dan Burn off, that was a moment. What did he do? Kept Dan Burn on the pitch. What happened? Moments later, Dan Burn gave away another penalty, which Brentford got. Now, the funny thing is, the second penalty that was awarded wasn't as clear as a penalty as the first one. But I'm not even going to blame the referee, because we've only got ourselves to blame in this moment. And we got punished for it, and we deserved it. We deserved nothing from that game. I thought Brentford were excellent. I thought Michael Coyote caused a lot of problems down that right-hand side. I thought Nathan Collins was excellent against Nick Valdemada. I thought Kevin Shorter and Dan Utara were very dangerous. Brentford were working hard and earned their victory. They played some beautiful football, so I'm not taking anything away from Brentford, but our performance was absolutely shocking. Dan Burn red card, and do you know what the only positive from this game is? Eddie Howe is now forced to make a change next game. He cannot start Dan Burn at left back, so it's got to be Lewis Hall. And now, do you know what the worrying thing is? If Dan Burn didn't get sent off, it would probably still be Dan Burn. So he's being forced to make this change. And that is the most concerning thing. The reluctancy from Eddie Howe to change tactics, adapt his style, or come away from these aging players that are underperforming is very concerning, and I'm not even going to lie about it. And then within the 90th minute, Brentford make it 3-1, and to be honest, they deserved to win that game by 2 goals, because we were shocking. All over the pitch, individual battles not winning them, just not even understanding what to do when they've got possession. There was no sequences of play, nobody making little triangles, no passages, nobody looking to progress the ball. We weren't playing through the lines. We look so passive in our system, in our shape, in our energy. We just look like 11 men that are playing the Sunday League team. Let's talk about some individual performances, because I want to speak about Malik Chow, because he is the only one on the pitch that can come off with his head held high. He can be proud of his performance. Just like all season, he's been our player of the season so far. He has been absolutely spectacular. Now, I don't often say this about Sandro Tonali. I thought he was okay today. He wasn't great. He worked hard, showed desire to break up play and win back the ball and anticipate what Brentford were trying to do. But he was incredibly sloppy in possession. He wasn't the only one. We were just not supporting each other in possession. When you've got no support, when you've got a hold of the ball, it's very difficult to find a pass. Nobody's creating an angle or creating an option. It's incredibly difficult to find a pass or find a way out. And I kind of thought the same for Bruno. Again, Bruno wasn't terrible, but he wasn't great. He just really didn't have much of an impact. But again, I put that down to the tactics from Eddie Howe, because as soon as we receive possession, it's got to be sideways or backwards, because he's not allowing the players to express themselves anymore. He's not thinking of ways or situations to get the players into dangerous positions. Once you get your players into dangerous positions, that's where they can showcase and have a bit of imagination. But we're not even doing that as a football club. It's passive, lethargic, and always backwards and sideways. And Dan Burn, I feel sorry for Dan Burn now, because he is out his depth at left back. He had a decent performance against Athletic Club, and Eddie Howe thinks he's the next Roberto Carlos. But it's not even in possession that he's struggling. Even defensively, he's not getting these distances right. He's either too close and the man's just spinning away from him, or he's leaving too much space, or he's getting dragged in areas that he shouldn't be. He was totally out his depth. He was shocking today, and he was all over the place. And that impacts our performance, because again, you've got Malik Chow, you've got Sven Botman trying to cover for him. You've got Joe Linton, you've got Jacob Ramsey coming in deeper. You've got Tonali moving out of his position to try and cover for Dan Burn. And it's simply not good enough, man. Then even our front line, Jacob Murphy was non-existent. Harvey Barnes, even the goal aside, couldn't really get into the game. Nick Valdemada was isolated as always. And then the only other good performance from this game is probably Lewis Howe when he come on. He did more when he come on than Dan Burn did all game. And it just baffles me that we're continuously going with Dan Burn, because not only is it impacting our shape defensively, it's impacting us offensively as well. And if Eddie Howe can't see that, there is concerning problems. And let's talk about Eddie Howe, because I think it's about time we just address the situation. Yes, Eddie Howe has been excellent for us and give us moments that I probably won't have in my lifetime again, but it doesn't mean he's not immune to any criticism. Like, I'm sitting here and I'm going to criticize Eddie Howe, and I'm not even going to be sorry for it, guys, because it needs addressed. It needs calling out. We can't just say, oh, he's God every single time, even at performances like that, because if this had been a one-off performance, I wouldn't act this way. But this has happened all season. And I've said this even before this video, unless he tweaks his tactics, nothing will change at all. If he's persistent with a 4-3-3, he has to set different instructions for the players. Brentford completely dominated the whole game. Poor management, being reactive rather than proactive once again. Just like it happened at West Ham, once the game is away from us and the other team is winning, that's when he decides to make changes, and he brings off one of our most threatening players in Harvey Barnes. Didn't understand it. Soon as that first penalty incident with Dan Burn, he should have been off the pitch. Actually, he should have been off the pitch before that, because it's clear as day with your eyes that these guys aren't performing for you. So the problems today, we were getting overrun in midfield, yet there was no change. There was no patterns of place yet there was no change. There was poor individual performances, yet there was no change. No attacking threat, yet there was no change. I'm going to say it, and I'm sorry if this offends you, but he looked absolutely clueless against West Ham and today against Brentford. Now, I'm not sitting here saying we need to sack Eddie Howe, because I genuinely don't believe we do, but he's got to change it, otherwise it will start to turn that way. And sometimes in football, when you don't replenish and drop an air fresher in the dressing room with your tactics, personnel, things can come a little bit stale. Look at Manchester City before they start to go into this transition. Things start to go a little bit stale. And I'm starting to think that is happening with Newcastle United. And I said this in the summer. I made a video about us going stale. I said, well, we need to be proactive in our transfers, in our policies, in our tactics before they eventually go stale. Because everything good comes to an end eventually. I'm not saying it is. And I believe that we will turn it round. But we can only turn around if there's tactical tweaks and Eddie Howe starts to trust in these players more, to be a little bit more expressive, but also trust in these tactics to be a little bit more adaptable. Every manager today has to be a little bit more adaptable, but now tactics are becoming ever so present in football. You've got to be adaptable, but you've also got to play what the game needs. We didn't do any of that today. We just let the game pass us by. That's the most frustrating thing. Sometimes, if Eddie Howe changes it and gives it a go, and is proactive, but yet it doesn't work, I'll hold my hands up and say, yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate you giving it a go, but when you don't do anything at all, that's what makes us think, does he have any ideas apart from this 4-3-3? Yesterday, I made a video on our numbers away from home to at home, and they're like chalk and cheese. We don't press away from home. We don't play with intensity. And we just sit back and invite pressure on. And that's our biggest problem. But look, guys, it's not a video I wanted to make. I didn't enjoy making this video. And I don't want to sit here and just whinge. But I need to get this rant out a little bit. I ranted again after West Ham. And I need to do the same again today. Now, I want to hear you ranting. If you are going to rant, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm just going to chill out. I'm just going to do nothing tonight, but just watch a nice game of football. Hope you have a nice evening. Hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And until next time, away the lads.